Welcome. On this January morning, we gather virtually across the country to celebrate the 22nd annual MLK celebration and the 92nd birthday of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In 1967, Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a speech entitled The Other America at Stanford University. This speech cites two stark realities for American citizens. Dr. King Jr. speaks of one America as overflowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of opportunity. This America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessities for their bodies, and culture and education for their minds, and freedom and human dignity for their spirits. And then there's the other America that has a daily ugliness about it that constantly transforms the ebulliency of hope into the fatigue of despair. During 2020, we found ourselves asking, how relevant is Dr. King's Other America today? After the tumultuous year we just experienced, with an international health crisis, police brutality resulting in international demonstrations, and an economic crisis, all resulting in a new level of abnormalcy in our lives, our 2021 Martin Luther King Jr. celebration theme is fitting and will be the Other America. While we open this morning's script with a portion of Dr. King's speech, we will also pay tribute to Dr. King's legacy by honoring his young 23-year-old protege, John Lewis, chairman of the Student Nonviolence Coordinating Committee, or the SNCC. John Lewis gave this speech at the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom before Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech. Before we kick off today's ceremony, please observe this rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing by the Stanford Talisman Alumni Virtual Choir.
Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing as a poem, which was set to music by his brother John Roseman Johnson in 1899. The song is now known as the Black National Anthem in America. It is a protest, a hymn, and a prayer of profound significance for our people. We lift every voice and sing to express ourselves. We lift every voice to show that we have strength in numbers and we will not be silent. We lift every voice and sing to be lifted, liberated, and free.
Freedom, the power to determine action without restraint. Freedom, the absence of or release from ties, obligations, or restrictions. Freedom, the ease or facility of movement or action. Freedom, frankness or boldness in manner or speech. Freedom, a political right. Until we are all free, none of us is free. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast
Please welcome our distinguished ALA President, Julius C. Jefferson, Jr.
In this America, millions of work-starved men walk the streets daily in search of jobs that do not exist. In this America, millions of people find themselves living in rat-infested, vermin-filled slums. In this America, people are poor by the millions.
Dr. King continued in his speech. In a sense, the greatest tragedy of this other America is what it does to little children. Little children in this other America are forced to grow up with clouds of inferiority forming every day in their little mental skies. As we look at this other America, we see it as an arena of blasted hopes and shattered dreams.
Many people of various backgrounds live in this other America. Some are Mexican Americans, some are Puerto Ricans, some are Indians, some happen to be from other groups. Millions of them are Appalachian whites, but probably the largest group in this other America in proportion to its size in the population is the American Negro.
The American Negro finds himself living in a triple ghetto. A ghetto of race, a ghetto of poverty, a ghetto of human misery. So what we are seeking to do in the civil rights movement is to deal with this problem, to deal with the problems of To America. We are seeking to make America one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John Lewis opened his speech with these words: "We march today for jobs and freedom, but we have nothing to be proud of, for hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here. They have no money for their transportation, for they are receiving starvation wages or no wages at all."
In good conscience, we cannot support wholeheartedly the administration's civil rights bill, for it is too little and too late.
There's not one thing in the bill that will protect our people from police brutality. This bill will not protect young children and old women from police dogs and fire hoses for engaging in peaceful demonstrations.
This bill will not protect the citizens of Danville, Virginia, who must live in constant fear in a police state. This bill will not protect hundreds of people who have been arrested on trumped-up charges. What about the 3 young men in Americus, Georgia, who faced the death penalty for engaging in peaceful protest?
The voting section of this bill will not help thousands of Black citizens who want to vote. It will not help the citizens of Mississippi, of Alabama, and Georgia who are qualified to vote but who lack a 6th grade education. One man, one vote is the African cry. It is ours too. It must be ours.
People have been forced to leave their homes because they dared to exercise their right to register to vote. What is there in this bill to ensure the equality of a maid who earns $5 a week in the home of a family whose income is $100,000 a year?
For the first time in 100 years, this nation is being awakened to the fact that segregation is evil and that it must be destroyed in all forms. Your presence today proves that you've been aroused to the point of action.
My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution. By and large, American politics is dominated by politicians who build their careers on immoral compromises and ally themselves with open forms of political, economic, and social exploitation. There are exceptions, of course, and we salute them.
What political leader here can stand and say, my party is the party of principles? For the party of Kennedy is also the party of Eastland, and the party of Jarvis is also the party of Goldwater. Where is our party?
V.P. Franklin is the author of The Young Crusaders, coming out in February, the first book about the civil rights activism of children and teenagers in the civil rights movement. Some of the most iconic images of the civil rights movement are those of young people engaged in social activism, whether it be the Little Rock Nine being escorted into Central High School in 1957 by soldiers, or children and teenagers being attacked in 1963 by police in Birmingham with dogs and water hoses. While the contributions of individuals like Dr. King or groups like the NAACP have been well documented, the significant and crucial roles of children and teens is rarely placed at the forefront. Without further ado, please welcome today's keynote, V.P. Franklin.
Morning. My name is VP Franklin, and I am the author of The Young Crusaders, the untold story of the contribution of children and teenagers to the civil rights movement. I'm so happy to be the keynote speaker here at the American Library Association's Sunrise Movement celebration in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm really, really honored to be participating in this event, in this activity. I'm quite a fan of Dr. King. I've actually done a biography of Dr. King and have done several books on the civil rights movement. And and in the process of doing that, I have spent many, many, many hours in libraries. You know, they always say that librarians are the historian's best friends, and that certainly has been the case with my career. And I think that if we added up all of the time that I spent in the library, I actually worked at the library at Penn State, it would probably be about 1/3 of my life was spent in the library. And so many, many, many of my friends are librarians, and I'm really happy to be participating in this program, this Martin Luther King Sunrise Celebration. I'm also here to sort of introduce you to the Young Crusaders. The Young Crusaders will be really the first book to document the contributions, the activities of children and teenagers during the civil rights movement and in the civil rights campaigns. There have been other studies that have looked at various aspects of children's contributions to the civil rights campaigns. There have been books on children who actually participated in the campaigns, and they tell their story. And there are various curricula out there. There's oral histories from the Library of Congress. But the Young Crusaders, which will be published in February of 2021, and you may have a version of it in your hands there, really tries to tell the story of children and teenagers' activities as part of the civil rights movement and the civil rights campaigns. We have to keep in mind that the children and teenagers often played significant and important roles in campaigns that were organized by adults, organized by civil rights organizations. And so that's what I document. I document children and teenagers who were the first ones to integrate all white elementary, secondary schools. So I'm dealing primarily with elementary school students and with high school students. There's actually a book that deals with teenagers and young girls' participation in school desegregation. It's by historian Rachel Devlin. It's called Girl Who Stood by the Door. Girl Who Stood by the Door. And that dealt specifically with girls and young women and their activities as the first Black students to enter these educational institutions. The Young Crusaders covers that, deals with those women, but also deals with other school desegregation campaigns that children and teenagers participated in, but also movements for school desegregation that the teenagers, the elementary and the high school students participated in. And so you have the School of Children desegregating all white schools, such as in Little Rock, Arkansas, or in Milford, Delaware, or Clinton, Tennessee. So I document the children who participated in those civil rights activities. Then you had, in the early 1960s, you had campaigns to desegregate public school systems in the North and the Midwest. And civil rights leaders, CORE, NAACP, et cetera, groups came together, these local civil rights groups came together and made a demand on the school system that they desegregate the schools. They were all Black schools in New York, Boston, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Cincinnati, other cities, and there were all white schools in these cities in the 1950s and early 1960s. The problem was that these all Black schools in New York, in Chicago, in Milwaukee, in Boston, these schools were in very, very bad shape physically, and they were extremely overcrowded due to the baby boom of the 1950s and 1960s and the migration of large numbers of Southern Blacks to these Northern and Midwestern cities. So the all Black schools were overcrowded, often on double shifts, and poor physical condition. And so the parents and local civil rights leaders and church officials, et cetera, they once you had the Brown decision, they say, well, the Brown decision should apply to in this situation in these northern cities. And so they organized to get the children transferred to all white schools that were not, for example, on double shifts. And so in each of these cities, groups came together to try to bring that about in the name of quality integrated education. They wanted quality integrated education. They were really just getting poor education and overcrowded education up until that time. And this is the 50s and early 1960s. And so school parents and community leaders got together and made this demand for quality integrated education in these cities. And when there was no movement on the part of school officials, they didn't bother to change or transfer, allow Black students to transfer to less crowded white schools. They organized boycotts. They organized boycotts for one-day boycotts for the students to demonstrate their commitment to this idea of quality integrated education. This is what the overall objective was. And the students who participated in these boycotts in these cities were also allowed to attend freedom schools. Freedom schools were opened up in all of these cities to coincide with the boycott and to inform the children and teenagers, the elementary and secondary school students, about how this civil rights activism, this boycott, contributed to the ongoing civil rights movement that was taking place in the United States in the 1950s and 1960s. That was basically the curriculum in the freedom schools that were open in Chicago, in Milwaukee, in Cleveland, in Boston, and other cities. And so the children and the teenagers participated in these protests. And I try to use the voices of the children and teenagers themselves to tell why they felt that they should participate in these activities. They felt that they understood that this was important and that this was adding to the civil rights campaigns that were taking place in the cities. But at the same time, you had children and teenagers organizing marches, demonstrations, sit-ins, boycotts on their own without necessarily the input or the authorization from adults or adult civil rights organizations. And so I document those activities in cities and towns around the country where the students themselves decided that the conditions in the all Black schools were awful, terrible conditions. And they organized a boycott to demonstrate their opposition to the conditions in the school. And so I have examples of high school and elementary school students who organized boycotts, walkouts in public elementary and junior high and high schools in order to protest against the conditions in these schools. They weren't necessarily walking out to demand to be integrated into all white schools. They were really demanding that their schools be improved. And so I document these activities between the 1930s and the late 1960s, and sort of demonstrate that many of the civil rights campaigns that took place in the 1950s and 1960s and stuff were successful because the children and the teenagers participated, such as in the citywide boycotts as part of the quality integrated education movement. That was one. And the students contributed by their participation in protests and boycotts of school systems and individual schools that they organized themselves. And so Young Crusaders, therefore, is the documentation of what teenagers and young people, teenagers and children accomplished and participated in and organized in the 1950s and 1960s. In the epilogue to the book, I make some suggestions about how children today in the 2020s could learn from the experiences of children and teenagers in the past. And if the children and teenagers today are concerned about improving the environment, cleaning up the pollution, repairing the damage that has been done to the environment and therefore damaging their future, they can look to the Young Crusaders in the past in terms of how they handled their demands for freedom and inclusion in the institutions of American society. And if you have students who, in the 2020s, who argue that there is a need to repair the damage that has been done to African Americans and other people of color as a result of racial discrimination and oppression, then the students in the 2020s can learn from the experiences of the Young Crusaders in the 1950s and 1960s, and they then can figure out how they can become young crusaders for the environment in the 2020s, thereby improve their future, create an alternative for themselves. There is definitely a need to introduce reparatory justice into the objectives of young people who are being subjected to the terrible conditions, the deteriorating conditions in the environment, and the racial inequities and violence that children of color and teenagers of color experience. And in the past, students used marches, sit-ins, demonstrations, walkouts, but also boycotts to demonstrate their commitment to change in the social and educational conditions. Since in the 2020s, students have been in the streets and marching and organizing demonstrations and carrying out sit-ins for racial justice in the United States. There will be a time when the young people can learn from the children of how they can pursue not just marches, not just demonstrations, but also boycotts to repair the damage that has been done to the environment and the damage that has been done to children of color due to racial violence and racial oppression. In the 1950s, the chant of children involved in civil rights campaigns was freedom now, freedom now. They wanted freedom now. And in the photos, illustrations in the book, and in all of the quotes, et cetera, that are in the Young Crusaders, they all chant freedom now. In the 2020s, given the deterioration of the environment and given the ongoing racial oppression and racial violence and inequities in the society, the chant for young people, for young crusaders who want to save the environment and improve the conditions for children of color and people of color in American society, the chant would very likely should be reparations now. So young crusaders of the past were interested in freedom now, and perhaps it is the young crusaders for the environment and racial justice in the United States in the 2020s will think in terms of reparations now and participate in a reparatory justice campaign that will provide a better future for themselves and for other young people and teenagers and children in the 21st century. Thank you.
In some parts of the South, we work in the fields from sunup to sundown for $12 a week. In Albany, Georgia, 9 of our leaders have been indicted not by the Dixiecrats, but by the federal government for peaceful protests.
But what did the federal government do when Albany's deputy sheriff beat attorney C.B. King and left him for dead? What did the federal government do when local police officials kicked and assaulted the pregnant wife of Slater King and she lost her baby?
It seems to me that the Albany indictment is part of the conspiracy on the part of the federal government and local politicians in the interest of expediency. I want to know, which side is the federal government on?
The revolution is at hand, and we must free ourselves of the chains of political and economic slavery. The non-violent revolution is saying, we will not wait for the courts to act, for we have been waiting for hundreds of years.
We will not wait on the President, the Justice Department, nor Congress, but we will take matters into our own hands and create a source of power outside of any national structure that could and would assure us of victory.
To those who have said, be patient and wait, we must say that patience is a dirty and nasty word. We cannot be patient. We do not want to be free gradually. We want our freedom, and we want it now.
We cannot depend on any political party, for both the Democrats and the Republicans have betrayed the basic principles of the Declaration of Independence. We all recognize the fact that if any radical, social, political, and economic changes are to take place in our society, the people, the masses, must bring them about.
In the struggle, we must seek more than civil rights. We must work for the opportunity of love, peace, and true brotherhood. Our minds, souls, and hearts cannot rest until freedom and justice exist for all people.
The revolution is a serious one. Mr. Kennedy is trying to take the revolution out of the streets and into the courts. Listen, Mr. Kennedy. Listen, Mr. Congressman. Listen, fellow citizens. The black masses are out there marching for jobs and freedom. And we must say to the politicians that there won't be a cooling off period.
All of us must be in the revolution. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village, and every hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution is complete. In the Delta of Mississippi, in the southwest of Georgia, in Alabama, Harlem, Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all over this nation, the black masses are on the march.
John Lewis closed out his March on Washington speech with these words: "We won't stop now. All of the forces of Eastland, Barnett, Wallace, and Thurman won't stop this revolution. This time has come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the heart of Dixie the way Sherman did. We shall pursue our own scorched earth policy and burn Jim Crow to the ground nonviolently. We shall fragment the South into 1,000 pieces and put them back together in the image of democracy. And we will make the action of the past few months look petty. And I say to you, Wake up, America. And now it is my honor and privilege to welcome our call to action speaker, Dr. Carla Hayden, 14th Librarian of Congress and ALA past president. Carla Hayden was appointed the 14th Librarian of Congress in 2016. She served as ALA president from 2003 to 2004. Served as CEO of Enoch Pratt Free Library in Baltimore, Maryland from 1993 to 2016. Dr. Hayden was the first African American to receive Library Journal's Librarian of the Year award in 1995. She was appointed a member of the National Museum and Library Services Board in 2010. Served as Deputy Commissioner and Chief Librarian of the Chicago Public Library, an Assistant Professor in Library and Information Studies at the University of Pittsburgh, and a Young Adult Services Coordinator, Library Associate, and Children's Librarian at the Chicago Public Library. Dr. Hayden earned her BA degree from Roosevelt University and her MA degree and PhD from the Graduate Library School of the University of Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carla Hayden.
Congratulations to the Social Responsibilities Roundtable for planning this virtual Dr. Martin Luther King holiday observance and sunrise celebration. We all know how much work goes into transforming an in-person program into a virtual format. Your hard work and creativity have made sure that this program, which has become a highlight of all ALA midwinters, continues to offer inspiration for a new year and beyond. This annual observance also allows us to come together to renew our resolve to make our work meaningful and worthy of the work of Dr. King. And so this year's call to action has special resonance with the celebration of Dr. King's life. It is taking place in a time that has challenged us all in so many ways, a time that has emphasized the need for libraries to continue to be beacons of hope and history in what Dr. King characterized as the other America. The very existence of this program shows the resilience, creativity, and dedication that will help you to respond to a call of action for our libraries, a call to remain a vital resource for everyone, especially the underserved and the underrepresented. Those qualities have already been on display in libraries throughout the country, from curbside and hotspot checkouts to innovative virtual events and programs. Librarians have often been called the original search engines and feisty fighters for freedom. Well, the call to action in this time is to continue to be those when libraries are needed more than ever. Your expertise in helping the public navigate online offerings are vital as people need and depend on you to be trusted guides on the side, especially in the virtual world. It is vitally important for you to collect and make accessible resources on current events, particularly health information and social justice. We need to find more ways to connect and provide opportunities in rural and urban communities, on reservations, in correctional institutions, and wherever people need access to information and inspiration. We must continue to call for access and equity in every format and venue. In closing, I know it has been hard for many of you to be closed physically to the public, but continue and remain the trusted source and resource you have always been. Our communities need you as you honor the life of Dr. King with your work. So thank you for all you do and what you have done during these trying times. We will move forward together.
As we close out this year's Martin Luther King celebration, I want to extend a special thank you to the American Library Association for sponsoring this commemorative event each year. Thank you to all of you for your virtual presence wherever you are today. A special thank you to Monica Chapman and Kristen LaHerde from the Office of Diversity, Literacy, and Outreach Services for your help in organizing this virtual gathering. A special thank you to Beacon Press Incorporated and our guest speaker, VP Franklin, and our call to action speaker, Dr. Carla Hayden, and my co-chair, LaVon Pringle. Blessings to each of you until next year. And as we close out this year, let us close it out with our annual song, We Shall Overcome.
Hi, I'm Jordan Millar. I'm 13 years old, and I've been a part of the New York Philharmonic's Very Young Composers for 5 years. Earlier this year, I created an orchestral arrangement of the civil rights anthem We Shall Overcome for the Philharmonic's Young People's Concert on Music as a Change Agent. The arrangement was to be performed by the orchestra with everyone attending. Although the concert was canceled due to the global pandemic, the need for us to be united in song still remains. Through this arrangement, I hope to provide people with faith, knowing that despite the many recent events, better days are ahead. Although the song was written over 100 years ago, its message of resilience is still just as relevant today. The phrase, we shall overcome, not only provides a sense of unity, but promises that together we can create change. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the performance, and please share with us how you are using your voice to change the world.
Black people need to overcome the idea that the same people that shut us out will be the ones to let us in. And those people, white America, I am looking at you and anyone else who brought into the narrative surrounding Black people and the stereotypes. It is time for you to unlearn, to overcome every lie you were told, every lie you told, every microaggression you partake in by accident. You see, it is time for you to do the work. Because posting a picture with the hashtag Black Lives Matter and asking me how I feel is no longer enough.